Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is. We're really so glad that you're here. I'm Cheryl Butler, and this is Journey Road Ministries, where we seek to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. So today is June 26th and is just an ordinary week. This is our first live event, so forgive us any glitches, which we have been encountering today. So we're on Zoom and live streaming to Facebook. You'll also find this recorded later on YouTube and our website, journeyroad.org. So if you need help with Zoom, just send me a chat message. And the meeting is captioned. So if you do want to turn on or off captioning, just tap or click on the CC icon. I think if you're on like an iPad, you may not have that option. So shall we get started with the gospel reading? Oops, I'm sorry. We're going to start with a song from William.
Okay, you want me to sing first before we read the...
Yeah, why don't you sing and then I'll read the gospel.
Okay, all right. Hello, William here. Back to bad guitar playing and even worse singing. I'm going to do a song today that's a Peter, Paul, and Mary song. I think it was written by them. And it's called Right Field, and it's about baseball and summer. So it seemed appropriate to me, and it has a direct relevance to our gospel reading today. So if you'll bear with me while I... There we go, that'll work. Saturday summers when I was a kid, we'd run to the schoolyard. Here's what we did. We'd pick out the captains and we'd choose out the teams. It was always a measure of my self-esteem. As the fastest, the strongest played shortstop and first. The last ones they picked were the worst. Well, I never needed to ask. It was sealed. I just took up my place in right field. In right field. It's easy, you know. Well, you can be awkward and you can be slow. That's why I'm here in right field, watching the dandelions grow. Playing right field can be lonely and dull. The little leagues never have lefties the pole. I dream of the day they hit one my way, but they never did. And still I would pray that I'd make a fantastic catch on the run and not lose the ball in the sun. And then I'd awake from this long reverie and pray that the ball never came after me. Here in right field, it's easy, you know. Well, you can be awkward and you can be slow. That's why I'm here in right field, just watching the dandelions grow. Off in the distance, the game's dragging on. There's strikes on the batter. Some runners are on. I don't know the inning, and I've forgotten the score. But the whole team is yelling, and I don't know what for. And suddenly everyone's looking at me. My mind has been wandering. What could it be? They point to the sky, and I look up above. And the baseball flows into my blood. Here in right field, it's important, you know. You gotta know how to catch. You gotta know how to throw. That's why I'm here in right field, just watching the dandelions grow. All right, going to hand that over to Cheryl now to read the gospel, and then we'll perhaps have a more meaningful discussion than baseball. Cheryl, we can't hear you.
Teal, unmute yourself. All right, so the gospel reading today is from Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. So when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately, aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. So may God bless the reading and the hearing of the word, and I will give it back to you. So we will have our message from Dr. William Painter.
Okay, so I'm going to sort of frame out some things about this. I always chuckle at the end of this reading because they said, "Well, give her something to eat." Like, of course you had to give her something to eat. She was dead. This passage is a very interesting passage, and it's a bit difficult to unpack because you got Jesus walking through crowds and healing people. That's what it says, healing people. And this woman who had been hemorrhaging, having menstrual issues for 12 years, is healed because she touched him, sort of snuck up and touched his clothing. And then this little girl who was 12 years old was also was dead. Both of these are acts that are ritualistically unclean. So it's really important to understand that Jesus had no compunction about breaking the rules when it came to clean or unclean ritual elements. He understood what they were, but you were not supposed to touch a woman who was menstruating, and you're not supposed to touch a dead body. Those were ritualistically unclean things, and he didn't care. He just did it anyway for them. Now, the reason I sang that song about because we all know what baseball is. We all been to a baseball game. Maybe we played baseball, and I actually played in left field. Okay, I was only marginally better than the guy in right field. But it's a sweet little song. It's a lovely little song. It's about a little child who isn't very physically adept, who goes to the schoolyard on Saturday mornings, excited, and knows before they even get there that they're going to be relegated to the least critical position in the diamond, okay, because they're slow. And so they stand out there and they watch the dandelions grow. And having been in that position myself, I completely identify. I was not particularly adept. I could throw, I could catch, I could sometimes hit the ball even. But most of the time, my mind wandered when I was playing baseball because I wasn't paying attention. But in this lovely little song, he knows he's not a hero. He's not really paying attention. All of a sudden, everybody's looking at him, and they're making a big commotion. He doesn't even know what the score is. Some strikes on the batter, some runners are on. He's just like clueless, right? It's just typical kid clueless. And he looks up, and he catches the ball, and it's an out. And he's gone from a goat to a hero. It's like Charlie Brown. He's gone from a goat to a hero. And he ends the song. It's important, to be. You got to know how to catch. You got to know how to throw, and his confidence is rebuilt. All right, that's a lovely song, and I like to sing it, and I like to share it. But I want to tell you something about that song. There was never a little boy, and there never was a baseball game, and there weren't any dandelions growing or not growing, and he didn't catch the ball out of the clear sky, and he didn't become a hero because he never existed. Okay, this song, as lovely and as full of messaging as it is, did not really happen. Okay, it didn't really happen. That doesn't take anything away from the meaning of the song, the meaning of the poetry. It's inspirational. We all identify with it. We all can, have been awkward. Most of us are probably not athletic. That's why athletes are a bit of a rare breed. And so we've all experienced this to some degree. And yet we can't say, well, who was the guy's name? Who was the girl's name in this? Well, she doesn't know. There was no person, all right? But there's meaning in that song because we all identify with it. And what I'm here to tell you is when they talk about Jesus healing people, I don't even know what that means in that context of a first century person, a pre-science person who had no idea why people got sick or how they got sick or how they got well. It was indeed, if you got sick, chances are you probably just die. Just think about getting an infection. You're a laborer, you're working in the fields, you lop off a finger by accident, and that's pretty much going to be it for you. Unless some miracle happens, you'll probably get sepsis and you'll probably die. And because they had no concept of cleanliness, the only cleanliness rules they had were these ritualistic, religious-based rules. Don't eat this and don't eat that. Chances are pretty good you might get sick. You eat pork, you get trichinosis. So they had these rules that kept them alive, but there was no understanding, no concept, no idea whatsoever of bacteria or infection or any of that kind of stuff. So when they say heal in this passage, they're not talking about healing in the way we understand healing. It's first of all, anybody who claimed to be a prophet at the time there had to be healing going on. Okay. And it's true for every prophet story, every important thing. There was had healing. It was an important part of the story. Just like in the song, it's important that he catch the ball in this song. Okay, otherwise the story doesn't make any sense. I mean, what a sad song that would be if here comes the ball and it just fell right out of my glove and I lost the game for my team. It doesn't end that way. It's not supposed to end that way. And in this passage, as in other passages about other prophetic figures, healing had to happen or it wasn't real. The old phrase, if I don't see a picture, it didn't happen, right? If there wasn't healing involved, it didn't happen. Now, this is healing in a pre-scientific mind, pre-scientific culture. So it would have been a sense of the magical. But that's not what's important about the story, okay? And what's important about this story, just like the song, is that it should speak to us about our role in taking risks and reaching out and helping others. And the Renaissance humanists, I said this had to do with the Vita Beata, the blessed life. It's a Latin phrase, vita, life, beata means blessed. And the Renaissance humanists who discovered these texts, who brought us the New Testament essentially really gave us the critical version of the New Testament because of their exegesis and because of their scholarship, and because, well, the Turks took over Constantinople and all the scholars left who could speak Greek and taught Greek to the Europeans. Well, they understood very clearly that these passages in the Bible were not to be understood literally. They were to be understood as an exemplar, as an example for a way for us to live. And they called that the blessed life or the Vita Beata. And that if you lead Oh, I got disconnected. Awesome. Where did I leave off?
See, the last thing you got was, let's see, they were meant to be understood as an exemplar, as an example for a way to live.
Right, and that's what's called the Vita Beata, the blessed life. That one goes to the world, healing, helping, nurturing, loving, because that's what Jesus did. So Jesus was the example of how to lead a blessed life. Now, they didn't. We have this odd understanding that if we lead a good life, we'll go to heaven. But I'm here to tell you right now, there was no heaven in Jesus's world. That all happens when the Greeks get a hold of these texts. There was no soul as a separate, eternally living thing, separate from the body. In the Old Testament and in the New Testament, it was breath. That was what was life. God breathed life into Adam, and when you died, you didn't breathe anymore. The breath left you. Okay, it didn't go somewhere and start breathing on its own somewhere. It left you. That was it. That was the end of the story. And so when Jesus talks about living like this, and when he gives you an example of living like this is not to get your ticket punched to go to heaven or to get a get out of hell free card to get out of hell. It is how do we live right here, right now. And we have really twisted this message. The Greeks are the ones who believed in a separate soul, all the way back to Plato and Socrates. Socrates talks about the afterlife when he's drinking the hemlock. Of course, he's got that on his mind, and he talks about the soul living on. And for Socrates, it was one of two places. So you either went to sleep, or you spent eternity talking to people who had died before you, and you could have great conversations. They loved conversations, so he figured that either way it went, it was okay with them. This idea of a hell or of eternal damnation is not part of Christianity or Christ or Jesus. This was added later. And so it's a great recruiter for churches because if you don't be good, you might go to spend eternity in hell. I mean, we haven't actually gotten any reports back, from people who've spent time there, but you better believe it because it's written in the Bible, except it's not. Okay, it's not. Heaven and hell are not in the Bible, and they're not part of Christianity. Jesus was talking about living right here, right now, and how to lead a blessed life. Because the people in this story, the first fellow with the little girl, he's wealthy, right? And the woman that touches his robe, she's impoverished, and he doesn't care whether they're wealthy or whether they're impoverished or whether they're clean or whether they're unclean. As well, we shouldn't. When we should be living like Jesus. We should be living a blessed life, and that blessed life means helping others, healing others, providing. And I've mentioned this before in previous messages. That Christianity spread because of the comfort care that Christians gave to people during plague-ridden periods. So plague's coming, people know it's coming, the priests leave, the nobility leaves, and it's just the poor schmucks who can't leave who are left there. And the Christians came in and provided comfort care, water and a wet cloth, the fever brow, and mostly they died. Mostly they got sick and they died. But the ones who didn't get sick and died appeared to be magically protected. Well, it's because they got sick and they didn't die, and they were immune to the plague. And so Christianity spread because of the willingness of Christians to lead a life that was blessed, to live a vita beata, to help others, to care for others, and to spread this wonderful message of good news that this is how one lives in this world. So that's my message. And it's I probably went on longer than I should have, but I'd like to hear, and I'm not a theologian, okay? I'm a historian and an educator, but I've not been dipped in the waters of theology. If I had been, I would probably have Achilles' heel. Someone would have held on to my heel and dipped me in. So I'm going to ask, the reason I wanted to do this live is because I wanted to raise this fairly important question about magical thinking, about magical healing, miracles, and about heaven and hell, and what we're supposed to take away from these passages. I don't know why they were 12. People speculated on it, but be like people hearing the song that I just sang, 1,000 years from now, and going, it's important to have dandelions on the baseball field so one can watch them grow. And if you don't have dandelions, well, it's all wrong. That's silly, right? Because the story is about a person's experience. So anyway, I'd like to hear Cheryl's thoughts, and if Mary's capable of I know Mary's got some technical difficulties, and you, the folks at home, or maybe watching. I'd like to hear your thoughts as well, even if you disagree with it, especially if you disagree.
Thanks, William. It's unfortunate Mary's having the problems with it, so she always has some great insight to these things.
Yes.
And she tell you that she is an agnostic about heaven and hell, as am I. It really is really irrelevant to how I live my life. I don't do things to help people so I'll go to heaven, or I don't not do bad things so I won't go to hell. That just isn't part of my beliefs anymore. And as you said, William, those are very Greek ideas that didn't come out of the Hebrew scriptures. It's kind of interesting when Jesus, what was translated as hell, like Gehenna, which was like a big garbage heap where they burnt the garbage there, which is kind of interesting. I was in Israel some years back, and Gehenna is now this beautiful park. So hell is now a beautiful park.
So you've actually been to hell and come back.
Yes, I have.
Wasn't so bad, was it?
Yeah, I've been to hell in this life, and some of the, some of our life.
You're in Kansas, so you're not far.
Thanks, William. Yes, I am in Salina, Kansas today, which is actually my home state of Kansas. But so the wonders of technology, which is nice. It doesn't matter where we are, we can connect and share ideas. But yeah, this idea of heaven and hell, I just find really problematic. And I know it was a great way, I guess the church thought, to be able to motivate people. They used fear a lot, and I guess that's the purpose of hell, to get people to come to church so they won't go to this terrible, terrible place called hell. But Jesus didn't talk about that. It's not really
No, but
scriptural.
Jonathan Edwards talked about that. And, historically, he's the man who
Yeah.
single-handedly influenced American Protestantism.
He did. But again, he is, as usual, these things are always taken out of context. And we kind of like to pick things out to support our perspective. And for some reason, there's something I think in our human nature, just likes this dark stuff. And we want to find ways to control people, or seem to think our way of thinking is the only way. And we talk about the Word of God, the Bible being the Word of God, and what's the word? Infallible, Well, what we know about these things we call the Holy Scriptures, they were not written by God. They were written by mostly men, probably all men, but we don't know because men take all the credit. So they could have been written by women, but probably not. But what so many people in the Christian world today believe is a theology of men. How different men have interpreted the scriptures. And each of us as individuals have as much right to interpret these writings as they did, these theologians. I'm not a big one for I find theology fascinating, but it doesn't have much real impact on my life. I like to think about ideas, and they're interesting and all, but when it comes down to it, it's really very simple. And my dad talked about it. And one of my daughters interviewed him, and he passed away this last March. But one of the things in this interview that my daughter did, and he talked about, if he had any, words of wisdom to give young people, and it was really that life is about helping others. Really, it's really if you focus on helping others and being of service, you'll have a good life. I mean, isn't that basically what Jesus said? About loving our neighbor. And what does that look like? Well, you would think that's very simple, but clearly people have different ideas, and I guess that's where the theology really comes in. Our theology, our understanding of God, will influence how we treat our neighbors. If we have a angry, punishing God, then we're going to be angry and punishing of people who we think are deserving of our punishment and judgment. When we pick scriptures out to condemn people that we don't understand. And it's interesting, as a member of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, we've always been kind of slim on theology, which it was born in the frontier lands, and that's why the women fairly early were ordained in the Disciples of Christ, because the women would go where men didn't want to go out to these little rural communities because there wasn't much money to be had. So you had a lot of women serving these small churches, but disciples didn't have much used for theology because they felt it got in the way of saving souls. And maybe that's true. We so often complicate things, and I don't think it's so complicated. We are here to take care of one another, to be of service.
It's Pride Month this month, and that's why I'm wearing my. I love this. It's my favorite, but
It's nice.
I want to just wear it every day, but I
Yeah.
can't really do that. But when I read about how people mistreat transsexuals, how people mistreat bisexuals or gay or lesbian or queer or whatever they're born to. I wonder. Well, I mean, how does that make the world a better place? I mean, how does that? A lot of these kids that are trans or who aren't comfortable in their own bodies, they run away from home because they're not accepted from home. They end up being trafficked. They end up, committing suicide. We condemn them because they are confused. I had it easy. I was always a white cis male. Okay, my life is and living in the United States, one of the richest countries. My life has been easy. I mean, it's not always been easy, but I didn't have those challenges. And why is it that we have to rely on a theology that prevents us from actually reaching out and being Christians? Right? I mean, when you say, theology got in the way of saving souls, well, it gets in the way of us helping. It gets in the way of us. We say, oh, well, look, they're bad people because they're trans, and you're gonna molest children in the bathroom. Quite honestly, there are more politicians that have done that than trans people. So maybe we're pointing the finger in the wrong direction. But the point is, we shouldn't be pointing a finger. We should be figuring out how to help people, how to support people, how to feed people, and we could do it. If we're Cheryl, if you and I we're helping somebody, we can talk of theology till the cows come home. Just don't stop helping that person. I mean, we can have an intellectual discussion. One of the things Petrarch wrote about the scholastics who were the theologians, he said, they'll tell you how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, but they know nothing about the blessed life. And that's exactly what's going on here, is that they can talk to you about theology all day long, and they may be right or they may be wrong or they may be whatever, but it doesn't help us on how to live. So when I go out into my neighborhood, and I wear a mask because it's important to wear a mask, not because I'm going to get sick. I'm not going to get sick. I've been vaccinated. I'm wearing the mask because I care about the people around me. I could be carrying that virus and be unaware of it because I've been vaccinated. So I can be completely asymptomatic, and some other poor schmuck who didn't get vaccinated can get infected by me inadvertently, completely inadvertently. So I wear a mask, and then I'm shocked at people who are they're unwilling to do one little thing to help their community heal. And what we're seeing right now, of course, as a result of that, is that the people who are getting sick and dying are people who weren't vaccinated, and who they're getting infected because people don't wear masks. And that's not virtue signaling. That's just public health. That's just washing your hands. That's just what the Christians did, right? They just provided comfort care. There's no magic involved in that. They just provide comfort care. So I wore my social distance t-shirt saying, hey, social distancing t-shirt. It's actually a parody on a group called Social Distortion. And the group put this out at the beginning of the pandemic. And it's one of my favorite bands. It's a bit rocking. No, I can't recommend them. It's a secret vice of mine. So any other comments, Cheryl? I really love your participation in this. I really see that sounds so patronizing. I'm glad you're here because I'm not a theologian. I haven't done. I've done some Old Testament exegesis, but I haven't done any New Testament exegesis. And you get a passage like this, and it's a powerful, packed passage that
Yeah.
People say, oh, well, and so what do we get? We have faith healers basing their work on this stuff, and it doesn't make it's just wrong in all kinds of ways.
I think as Christians, it's important that we are knowledgeable about these scriptures, and I think it's good to study them, but it's important to remember the context in which they're written, and that's where the historian can be very helpful, and to recognize, when we're reading like letters of Paul, that we're reading someone else's mail. And he's answering specific questions, and we don't even know what the questions are. And so while there are useful things, and most of the Gospels are parable, even the stories that the writers are telling about Jesus are parables, and so we're supposed to think about, what do these things mean, and how can they apply to my life? But it really comes down to a very simple rule of how we treat each other, and that we're here to support one another and to be helpful. And you would think it was very simple. I used to think it's very simple. One of the co-founders of the disciples, it was Alexander or Thomas, had said, the plain meaning of the text, the meaning of the text should be clear. And in it, it's not. That's why it was so clear we wouldn't have like 39,000 different Christian denominations, because nobody can agree on everything. But I still think, these writings, they have value, and they help us. For me, it helps me to see a better understanding of my inner workings, my own life, to bring some deeper understanding of who I am and how I need to relate to the divine, and to be able to see that in other people. And it's not always easy to see that in other people, especially when they don't seem to be very nice people. It's easy to be kind and compassionate to people who we think deserve it, but it's really hard.
You see these
for these
videos on YouTube or on Reddit or something, and there's this white middle-class woman who is exploding about service or about being made to wear a mask or something, and we like to vilify. We like to, we have a name, we call them Karens, and we point our fingers at them and ridicule them, and that's just so wrong, because what is it? That person must be so fundamentally unhappy to do that, to act that way in public. And instead of us reaching out and embracing that person and trying to make that person feel comfortable and warm, we point our fingers at her and say, look what an awful human being that is. Well, that doesn't actually make us a better human being. And
we don't know what roads these other people have walked down, and what scars they're living with, and what pain in their life. And unfortunately, I partially is responsible, or a lot of religious leaders that teach really bad stuff. And
the idea of communion, denying communion to people based on their beliefs. Well, I don't know, man. Call me crazy, but if you're going to give communion to Judas, maybe everybody ought to be able to take communion. It's a pretty low bar. Judas is a pretty low bar, right? And if he can take communion, well, it seems like everybody ought to be able to have communion.
Yeah, it comes back to the different understandings of, what these sacraments are, and the different.
Right.
That's why I don't have a whole lot of use with theology, other than it's kind of fun to talk about and toss ideas about.
Yeah.
But and I don't even we talk about this being Pride Month, and then all I had was this black T-shirt on that says "Justice is the Jesus thing." But I was reading an article about a woman. She's making a documentary about the mistranslations in the Bible, specifically around the text where it's translated as homosexual, which is not what the Greek words mean at all. And I'm at the point where, I really don't care. I just,
No,
I don't,
no.
I don't, whether it's a choice or not, it's, who cares if people are loving and living the blessed life. We are not 2,000 years ago. We understand things differently today. We understand, so we have a bit different understanding of human sexuality. And I think it's Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. So but some people are just really resistant to knowing better. And that's where, unfortunately, that's where the theology plays in it, because that's so often keeps people from understanding more, because this theology of fear keeps people from growing. And we've got all
I think
these
it's enough of a challenge, Cheryl, for us to try to emulate and walk in the footsteps of Jesus of Nazareth.
Right.
That's enough right there. If you can do anything that even comes close to that, you're going to be all right. You're going to be at least on the path of the Vita Beata. Whether you believe in whatever, Jesus didn't say whether you believe in. Jesus just did. And
right. And my dad, that's what my dad talked about in one of his last interviews, is being so blessed and having a blessed life. And that's because he spent his life caring for people. I never heard him say an unkind thing about anybody, no matter how awful they were. He was just a kind person. And I do hope when I grow up, I'll be more like my dad. But it's, he was what I would call the hands and feet and voice of Christ in the world. And he had gotten so he didn't have a lot of use for churches.
That's a different subject.
Yeah.
Well, I think we ought to wind this up. We've been going on about an hour.
Well, yeah, we still have a few minutes here. But I mean, it's good. It's really great to have these conversations. And hopefully, as we move forward, we'll get more voices in it. You and I, William and Mary, if she were here, we just could talk all day about these things.
and have done. Yeah.
Like I said, I don't have much use for theology, but I'll talk about it all day.
There you go. That's right. Yep. I'm with you on that. Okay, well, Sharon is, I think, our singular. She's our fangirl. Sharon's our fangirl.
Hey, Sharon.
And thank you, Sharon, for showing up today and making comments. We're gonna keep. I'm gonna keep doing this. It's a bit of a complicated.
We'll try again next Saturday. I think I'll be in town, and which really doesn't matter. I've always got a computer with me.
Okay. All right.
Besides being a poor theologian, I'm also a poor.
I may see if I can find an accordion for Mary to play. She should be playing an accordion.
Yeah, it was a sad day when Mary had to give her accordion up, because she just can't hear music anymore.
Right.
But you should get yours fixed, and you could play a song and
play a good rousing polka.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're really the best for polkas. Love a good polka.
Okay, well, all right. God bless. Cheryl, thank you very much for doing all the work and setting this up. And Sharon, good to see you. I'm glad you were able to get connected. And I guess we'll see you on the flip side, huh?
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
God bless. Thank you very much.